Okay. I think we're live now, and yeah. And hey guys, you got PD Newman with us. We're gonna play the intro and get started, and it should be an amazing show. Okay. Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about, this is going to be amazing. We're going to be talking about entheogens and Freemasonry, the illusion mysteries and psychedelic sacraments, historical uses of DMT, psilocybin, and tryptamines, the Holy Grail as a psychedelic allegory, ritual technology for spiritual contact, mysticism, hermeticism, and the left-hand path, and much more. Today I have with me PD Newman. He's an author, researcher, and Freemason whose work explores the entheogenic origins of mystical and initiatory traditions. In his latest book, Tripping on the Trail of Ghosts, he investigates the hidden use of psychoactive substances in Western mystery schools, secret societies, and alchemical rites. Newman is known for connecting the dots between ancient rituals and mind-altering sacraments, suggesting that the entheogens played a crucial role in spiritual awakening and initiation. And I'd like to give him a big warm welcome to the show. PD, thanks for coming on. How are you?
Doing fine, thank you. Good to meet you, Rob.
Yeah, and do you also go by Danny? I think Gail said you go by Dan. Is that correct? Or
Yeah, I go by Danny. I publish my books under PD, but all my friends know me as Danny, so feel free to call me Danny.
that's awesome. Dad, welcome, and thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. I'm really excited about this. I was going to ask you. So, what made you name the book "Tripping on the Trail of Ghosts"?
So, well, the latest book is about the model of the afterlife that is ascribed to by the Mississippians, the Native Americans who existed in the southeastern part of the continent from around 1000 AD up until about the 18th century. But they have a model of the afterlife um, that wherein they believe that the soul in certain cases accesses the Milky Way galaxy, and they refer to the Milky Way galaxy as the trail of ghosts or the path of souls, and as a way to initiate individuals into that knowledge, because it was a secret knowledge. Not everyone knew about it, but in order to initiate them into this, they would use a number of entheogenic plants to induce what we might call a near-death experience or an out-of-body experience.
That's so interesting. So, let me ask you this: how did you get involved in starting to research this? What got you interested in all this stuff?
Well, it really started with my childhood. I grew up in the Deep South. Was always interested in psychology and the extremes of psychology, insanity, things like that. And it wasn't long before I discovered psychedelics, and psilocybin mushrooms are very plentiful here. They grow in virtually every cow field. So long as the cows are grain fed, they'll produce mushrooms. So I started experimenting with those very early on, 11, 12 years old. And
Wow.
it was those experiences that made me begin to ask the sorts of questions that landed me in things like Freemasonry, Rosicrucianism, yoga, African religions, all kinds of different places. I never would have expected I'd end up as a grown man, but it all began with some very intense, enlightening psychedelic experiences.
That's fascinating. So, and you started early when you were 12 years old. Early, that's amazing.
Yeah,
Like,
my first LSD trip, I was 11 years old, and it it changed everything. I don't talk about this often, but I'm on the spectrum. I was diagnosed with autism very early on, um, and I don't remember much about my early childhood. And in fact, very distinctly, I recall the effect of when I realized something was different after I had taken LSD. It was almost like blinders fell off, like I was in a tunnel um, for my life up to that point. So I really feel like, when people say they were reborn, rebirth, I, I can really identify with that. In a big way, it feels like my life began uh, when I took LSD and mushrooms. I don't know how familiar you are with the effects of these substances, but
I've experimented with mushrooms a lot, and when I was young a lot, but now I'm more for spiritual evolution. And matter of fact, I just took a couple caps tonight, because
okay, yeah,
yeah, I mean, I had some left over because my buddy invited me over the other night. He was like, "Hey, you want to take some shrooms?" I was like, "Sure." And then I had some left over, so I put them in like a cigarette pack, and then I was waiting, and I took a couple tonight, and then like right when I was waiting for you to decide if we were going to do this, I like dozed off. So I don't know if that messed it up or what, but I feel okay. I mean, I was excited about this interview, so I was like, well, I'll try, yeah, but but it's sort of like spiritual evolution,
yeah, absolutely. That's a big part of my spiritual practice today. But the effects of the two, even though they're similar in a lot of ways, they're different in that. And I think Terence McKenna put it really well. He said, with LSD, you're the only guy in the room, but with mushrooms, if you take enough, there's all sorts of different beings that can potentially show up. Um, so my experiences with mushrooms uh, definitely validated that kind of a sentiment, where I first having encounters with um, other beings, and that's so I see mushrooms as much more of conducive to spiritual practice, wherein the spirituality that you ascribe to espouses a belief in other spirits and other beings. With LSD, I don't tend to get that. I tend to get the awakening into Godhead kind of experience. The I am the one kind of experience. I don't mean like the one as in Christ, but like I am the one that is behind all being, and everything that exists is a mask of myself. That kind of stuff comes up with LSD, but with mushrooms, if the dose is right, I've found myself in the company of serpent people, all kinds of stuff comes up with mushrooms.
Yeah, and I just have to say this for YouTube purposes because we are on YouTube. I say YouTube, we're not giving medical advice. We're not trying to diagnose or treat anybody. We're not trying to convince people to use substances or anything like that. I tell people to see their physician, and this is for entertainment purposes only. But no, yeah, I have to say that for YouTube. Otherwise, they'll they'll take the
Sure,
video down.
we're characters. We're just playing a role right now.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you about that. I was going to say, like, growing up in the country, did you ever have any? Because I listened to your interviews with Jeffrey Mishlove, and you guys got really deep in that, like, really like deep. And I was like, man, I don't know if I can go that deep. Like, I might not know that much, but like, I did get some really good questions from ChatGPT. And then also on top of that, I wanted to ask you, did you ever have any paranormal experiences or UFO experiences growing up? Because I don't think you talked about that, but like you said, you had experiences with beings. So like, what were you seeing? Like, what was going on? Like,
That's something I also very rarely talk about, but um, m- both myself and my brother, Michael Newman, um, he's been my partner in crime, since we were kids. He's 14 months younger than me, um, and so he's been right there with me through almost all of what I've gone through. But he and I both have been what you might call lifelong experiencers. Um, we still continuously, both of us, see UFOs quite frequently. Um,
wow.
I've only had one really close up encounter with a UFO. That was back about 20 years ago. My wife and I, she wasn't my wife at the time, but we were living together. We were working at the same place, and we had both gotten off work around the same time, which was close to 10 o'clock p.m. And we were driving home, which was about a 20-minute drive. And right when we got to the exit, right over the bridge was a craft just floating there. The way it looked was it was covered in lights that all seemed to flash at different times. And we parked the car, we got out, and we stood underneath it and just stared at this thing. But I remember being overwhelmingly calm and not perturbed. When I look back on how I reacted, it seems odd. I consciously think if that were to happen to me now, I would be like, wow, look at this. This is incredible. There was none of that. We were absolutely calm just watching this thing for about 20 minutes. And then a second one, identical to the first, came over the tree line, hovered next to the first one, and then both of them shot off at lightning speed and were gone. And we got in the car and went home and didn't say a word about it. We didn't talk about it. All night long, we didn't talk about it until around we got home. When we noticed we had gotten home later than we should have. We got home around midnight. And like I said, it was a 20-minute drive. So when we both said, wait a minute, something happened earlier. What happened? And we said, oh yeah, we saw a UFO, and we thought we had stood there for around 20 minutes. So we should have gotten home around 10:45 when in fact it was midnight.
Wow.
So now we go to bed that night, wake up the next morning, it's again completely gone. We don't talk about it. We don't remember that it's happened. And we both had to be at work the next day at the same time. So we're on that drive going in the opposite direction. And all of a sudden, we both at the same time got this feeling, what were we doing? Didn't something happen last night? And right when I was about to say, oh yeah, we saw a UFO, we hear this incredible bang sound, like a rock has hit the car or something. And both of us are shocked. We say, what was that? And eventually the car drives fine, so we kind of let it go. And then a few minutes pass on, and Rebecca, my wife, she says, wait a minute, we were talking about something when that sound happened. Oh yeah, what were we doing last night? And again, right when I'm about to say, oh yeah, we saw a UFO, the same sound happens. This enormous bang noise again distracts us from what we're talking about. And it happened a third time where we finally say, whoa, this keeps distracting us. What we were talking about, what we did last night, what happened? Finally, I was able to blurt it out. We saw a fucking UFO last night. And as soon as I got that out of my mouth, we hear another bang, but this time we had a blowout and the car swerves off the road. But, we're stuck. We can't go anywhere. But at that moment, we both realized, yeah, we saw a UFO. And for some reason, something was keeping us from remembering it and talking about it.
And it sounds like you might have had missing time too.
We did. I mean, 2 hours. 2 hours went somewhere, or at least an hour and 15 minutes. We should have been home an hour and 15 minutes earlier than we were, but I have no memory of that, which is odd because I do have memory of a very real encounter I had on mushrooms in college when I took 30 grams.
30 grams?
Took 30 grams, yeah.
Holy shit, dude. That's a mega hero dose. I mean, I've heard of people taking 5 grams before, but dude, you're a legend.
We had no concept. We had no concept of heroic dose or anything back then. Our motto was, you eat them until you start feeling it, and then you keep eating them. And we ate. each of us, my wife and I both, ate roughly 30 grams. She passed out, went completely unconscious, and I couldn't wake her up. But my experience was being taken up into what I interpreted as space, because there were points of light everywhere that I interpreted as stars. But with these snake people, these snake beings like Nagas or seraphim, I don't know what they were,
Yeah.
but it was as real as this at the time, So I bring that up to say it's odd that I can recall that just fine, but that hour and 15 minutes under the bridge 20 years ago, no clue what happened.
That is so fascinating. Like, I mean, I don't even. I mean, like, yeah, that's yeah, wow, that blows my mind. That really does. Did you ever think about getting like regression work to like see like if you had some kind of contact experience?
I've considered it, and being that I am deeply interested in psychology, I've always been interested in that kind of thing. I can. I practice hypnosis myself, but I myself have never been hypnotized. So I've considered it, but where I am, that's not a service that's easily accessed. I'd have to do some traveling probably to find
Well,
someone.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but like Dolores Cannon, her thing was like quantum healing hypnosis, and she said it all had to be done in person. But now a lot of people are doing it online. Like a lot, you can be seen online and stuff like that. A lot of practitioners will do like sessions online. All my set, I've had 12 regressions. They've all been online. But I mean, I don't know. I think maybe in person it might be a little bit better. You might be able to get some kind of like I don't know, connection that you can't get online. So I feel you there. You know what I mean? I think I don't know. What do you think? Like,
I've never heard of it being done online, so this is new to me.
yeah. I can even introduce you to someone. My friend Maya, she does it. And other people too. I have other people, friends who do it. It's yeah. It's pretty common now. Yeah. But yeah. I mean, I just told my other guest that's coming on 8:15. I told him I might be 10 minutes late because I want to get into this stuff with you. So when we talked at the beginning about tripling on the trail of ghosts, that sounded fascinating. That like, that these Native Americans were on the trail of ghosts. And were they having encounters with ghosts? What, like through psychedelic experiences? Would you say?
Absolutely, yeah. And the major function that the psychedelics served in that setting, in that context, especially near the end of the Mississippian period, um, and this was mainly in Alabama, around a place called Moundville, which became a sort of necropolis where Mississippians would travel from all over the Southeast to bury their dead there. But a group of shamans, we might call them, they had a sodality, a secret society of sorts, where remember I said that the knowledge of how to access the path of souls was secret knowledge, right? So they've been initiated into this. They have this knowledge, and they offer a service. For a nominal fee, they will act as a psychopomp. They will guide the spirit of your deceased loved one, friend, whatever, onto the path of souls and get them there, even though the deceased doesn't have that knowledge. So they're offering to take them, right, for a fee. So in that context, there's definite purported activity, encounters with the dead, because the shaman acting as the psychopomp is himself leading a ghost, leading a dead person.
That's fascinating. Wow, that is fascinating. Like, now I wanted to transition a little bit. You've written a little bit more about the possibility of DMT being used in Masonic rituals. Do you believe Freemasonry has lost a vital component of spiritual legacy, or do you feel like a lot of Masons don't even know about that, or do you think some do, or what do you think's going on with that?
Yeah, I've been a Mason for a long time. I've never met a single Mason that had used DMT in a Masonic setting or was aware that it was at one point used. This is something that we only have evidence of in the 1700s, right? So, um, whether it continued on in a secret fashion or whether that was knowledge and practice was completely lost, uh, there's no evidence to tell us either way. But the evidence is quite clear up until around the 1730s that DMT was absolutely being used via a psychoactive species of acacia. And in the literature, they talk about it. They're saying that that the acacia is the prima materia, or the first matter of alchemy. So with alchemy, the idea is that if you can figure out what the first matter is, the prima materia, then and then you can put the prima materia through this process that produces what's called the lapis philosophorum, the philosopher's stone. And it's
Oh,
this, and it's the philosopher's stone that is metaphorically said to be able to transmute base metals into gold. Well, the acacia in Masonic literature, they say that the acacia is the prima materia, and you can extract from it a stone. That stone being DMT crystals, which looks very much like a stone once you extract it. And they're consuming it in the third degree. So in early Masonry, there are only 3 degrees. The third degree is the Master Mason degree. And in this degree, you're made to represent a figure named Hiram Abiff, who is
the
murdered.
founder of Masonic, right?
Say again?
Wasn't he the founder of Freemasonry?
Well, he's one of the 3 grand masters, legendary grand masters. But when he's murdered, he's buried beneath a sprig of acacia, and he's eventually raised from his place of interment. And the candidate for the Master Mason degree is made to represent him in a mythodrama where, unbeknownst to the candidate, he's about to play the part of this guy that was murdered. And so it's during that portion of the ritual where he's symbolically murdered that the candidate would have been exposed to DMT, probably unbeknownst to him at the time, which would in turn induce that near death experience, right?
Wow, that's fascinating. Yeah, this is amazing stuff. Like, um, so what drew you to Freemasonry? Like, was it just the stuff you had learned and from like, or yeah, like what? Because like, not a lot of Freemasons are. I have another Freemason guy that comes on my show. His name's Robert Sullivan the Fourth, and he decodes like esoteric symbolism and movies and stuff. But he told me like not all Masons are like you and him. You know, some of them are just like normal guys who want to join it. It's like almost like like you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. There are all types of Masons, and if all Masons were esoterically minded, then there wouldn't be enough of us to keep a roof over our heads. It takes all types, and I don't say that to detract from those Masons who are not esoterically inclined and who are simply interested in the fraternal aspect of it. They are just as valid a Mason as anyone else. But it takes all of us to make the wheels turn and keep turning. But that being said, there is a lot of esoteric material in the lectures, in the degrees. I look at it like this, like the Masonry and all of its symbols and rituals. Imagine it's like this enormous banquet, a big smorgasbord of all of these foods, right? And
Yeah.
you've been invited to this banquet, as have, dozens of other people. Well, some people might only eat certain foods, right? Some of it they might not like. Other people will eat completely different foods. Some people will eat both of those foods. Some people won't eat at all. They just come to maybe chat, right? So Masonry is a lot like that. You're faced with a variety of esoteric and occult and philosophical and ethical and practical symbols, and it's up to you whether or not you engage with them, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And you've written another book called Alchemically Stone, correct?
That's my first book that looks at the use of DMT in early Freemasonry. Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah. Now, how does this book build on or diverge from your previous book, would you say?
From my current book on the
Yeah.
Native American,
Yeah.
well, they diverge quite a lot. They're similar in that both of them deal with DMT. Because in the new book, I'm also looking at the role of honey locust, Gleditsia triacanthos, which is a tree that shows up a lot in the legends and in the ceremonies, as well as in the botanical assemblages recovered from the sites. Well, it was previously classified as Acacia americana. So it's a species of acacia, and it has DMT in its roots. And there's good evidence that some Native American groups were exploiting it for that purpose. So there's a similarity there. There's also a similarity in that we're talking about two secret orders that have practices that, in one way or another, revolve around death. So they continue that way, but there's a vast departure, and the cultures behind both are so different. Masonry is staunchly European, whereas the Native American different the cultures, the practices are just that, Native American. So they're quite different. But again, if you've read one of the books, if you've read the first book, when you read the new book, it's clearly my voice. I do have a kind of a certain set of interests. And another thing that ties all of my work together is ascent motifs. The idea that you can, or that your soul can, or that your psyche can ascend through various levels of being. That's something that you'll see in both.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, how did you even go? How did you even research the material for this? Like, how, you know what I mean? Where did you look and stuff like that? Like, or was it just, did it somehow just come together?
Well, in the Master Mason degree, you're all exposed to that acacia symbol. And from there, because I had already extracted DMT from acacia myself before I became a Mason. So I'm immediately, part of me is saying, what could it be that acacia is there because of its entheogenic potential? And then there's another part of me saying, that's just confirmation bias. Accept the symbol on its own terms. Meet Masonry where it is and don't try to impose anything on it. So I set that suspicion aside, but I still continued to pursue research in Masonry. So I started reading every version of the rituals I can find, because there's slight differences throughout jurisdictions and different countries. And it wasn't until I read the rituals for what's called the Egyptian rite of Freemasonry that I come across this clear passage where he says that the acacia is the prima materia. From it we extract this stone, and that it will raise your spirits and cause you to understand things in a different way. And eventually it causes the candidate to see angels in visible form in the lodge. And one of the most common effects of DMT is to to see otherworldly type beings, whether they're described as angels or aliens or demons or ghosts or whatnot. So that was my first real indication that there might be a possibility that it was being used as an entheogen. But as I dug deeper and deeper, I found more and more supporting evidence that finally made me say, you know what, I better write this down and publish it before it's lost and forgotten for another 300 years.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, and I was going to ask you, what do you make of the idea that entheogens were the original sacraments of ancient mystery schools, like the Elusians or even early Christianity?
I absolutely ascribe to that notion. There nothing else makes sense, especially when we're talking about Eleusis. How do you take thousands of people every year and consistently induce a mystical experience in each and every one of them so that they leave a completely changed person? Ritual can do that for a certain subset of people, for a certain demographic, but for thousands and thousands of people every year, um, nothing else makes sense except for uh, a, a drug, because it's kind of a fail-safe mechanism. You take the drug, you're going to have a transcendental type experience. Um, so I absolutely believe that. Now, what the drug was is harder to define. I think there's a lot of evidence that it could have been opium, but then again, in my experience, opium has never induced that sort of experience for me. And I think there's good evidence that it could have been some form of ergot, some way of preparing ergot that made it safe to consume. Because LSD and related compounds, LSA, will absolutely induce that kind of an experience. And there is some evidence they did find in Italy at a temple dedicated to the same goddesses that are central to the Elusinian mysteries. They did find ergot present. They also found ergot in the dental calculus of a skeleton that was found in the area. So there's good evidence that they were using ergot. But kind of like with soma in the Vedic tradition,
Yeah.
soma probably wasn't one thing. It probably was in the beginning, but with migration, with climate change, all of these different factors that will make some substances no longer available, which opens up avenues for trying other ones, and then they become substitutes or surrogates, but are used in the same context in the same way. Kind of like with the Holy Grail, right? We talk about the Holy Grail. What makes the Grail holy is its contents. The Grail persists as a surrogate as a symbol for what it can, what drinking from it can induce, but it's the substance within it that is kind of the variable. It can change. And I think that's what probably happened in a lot of cases, because many of these traditions are so archaic, and a lot of them span big geographical areas. Eleusis was pretty isolated, but with Soma, um, India had such a major influence on so much of the ancient world that it's hard to believe that what was Soma for one group was also Soma for another.
Yeah. Real quick, do you think that I was going to ask you this. Do you think that they were referring to Amanita Mascaria when they were talking about Soma? Because I have a guy that comes on my show. I mean, I have a couple sponsors that are Amanita Mascaria. Like, one of my friends who does that, he seems to think that they might have been talking at one point about Amanita. And what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think R. Gordon Wasson, he's made great argument for that. Carl A.P. Ruck, there's a number of different scholars that have argued very well for Amanita Mascaria. There's also scholars that have argued for Paganum Harmala, which is also Halma, and the neighboring Persian Zoroastrian tradition. Ephedra has been argued. Cannabis has been argued. Chris Bennett has made really convincing arguments for cannabis. And I think rather than say that only one of any of these are correct, it makes more sense to say, well, they're probably most, if not all, correct, depending on the epoch at which we're talking about, right?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree 100%. What I was going to ask you about was how do you feel like the ancient alchemists would describe states of consciousness and that, your opinion, mirror modern psychedelic experiences?
Yeah, I think that there's a number of cases where the alchemists are speaking in a language that seems to be psychedelic. Just the alchemical language itself, it's been, it's a twilight language it's liminal. It's between things, and they're able to analyze metaphor and simile in such a way that makes even the most basic things bewildering. But I think, when we look at someone like Thomas Vaughan, it's very clear that he, in his literature, you're not going to find him talking about a substance, but it's very clear that he's talking about states of consciousness that, to me, are readily identifiable as psychedelic. Yeah, I think that many alchemists were preoccupied with psychoactive substances, and that's where, that's where the problem comes in. Alchemy as a laboratory exercise, where they're actually producing a substance, and alchemy as an internal process, right, where you're going through something internally. Well, the meeting ground, the lowest common denominator for both of those things, is producing a drug in a laboratory that causes an internal process, right, an internal change. So yeah, I definitely am of the opinion the alchemists were hip to a number of different psychoactives.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then in your research, did you come across any links or between like psychedelics and spirit contact, besides the thing with the Indian or the Native Americans, or even alien type experiences?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. With aliens, whether or not those snake people were aliens, I can vouch for that in my own experience. But there's an interesting figure named Alexander Rouhier. He was involved in the Fulcanelli affair. Fulcanelli was an alchemist that, he was a number of people that wrote under the name of Fulcanelli, but he was one of the individuals behind it. And he was a French pharmacist, and one of the first people to extract mescaline from peyote, and he was selling it, peyote and seeds and extracts, through mail order. But he wrote several papers on what he called herobotany, which is like heretic priestly botany. And he mentions a number of different plants, including ayahuasca, San Pedro, morning glory seeds, coca, opium, cannabis, and all of these things. He talks about how they increase one's psychic abilities, and in that process opens one up to spirit contact. And we also see that with a group of Rosicrucians under a man named Frederick Hockley, who was teaching mirror gazing, magic crystal gazing, what's called catoptromancy, to a man named F.G. Irwin and his son Herbert Irwin. And they were using a number of different drugs and staring into mirrors and crystal balls.
Yeah, scrying, right? Sorry, I didn't mean to. Yeah,
And
that's so interesting.
specifically to speak with the dead. Now, we know they were using drugs because Herbert, who was only 15 at the time, overdosed and died from laudanum, which is opium infused in alcohol. He was taking laudanum in order to increase his ability to speak with spirits through the crystal ball. And his father, Captain F.G. Irwin, was so devastated by this that he spent the rest of his life trying to do the same, trying to contact his dead son through the crystal ball, using these drugs. So yes, the drugs have been directly related in the West, in the occult, with spirit communication for a long time.
That's awesome. And one of my final questions is, and I'd love to have you back for a part 2 because this was amazing. You mentioned ritual technology. What do you think the ancient mystery rites were designed to do in terms of like altering reality?
Say that one more time.
You mentioned in your book ritual technology. I said, what do you think the ancient mystery rites were designed to do in terms of like altering reality?
Well, yeah, it depends on the culture and what they're having to deal with. For instance, with the Mississippians, and this is true of the Mayans and the Aztecs as well. One of the things with which they were very concerned was the weather. They needed ample rainfall to be able to sustain their numbers. They needed corn. They needed all of this food. And the climate here was going through a drastic change at the time. It caused droughts throughout most of Central America, forced a number of those natives up into North America, where they, mingled with the already existing Native Americans. And much of what their magic concerned with was trying to bring rain back. So a lot of magic for Native Americans in particular was focused on ensuring rainfall, ensuring good weather. And this was true on up into the Mississippian period in Cahokia, where Timothy Pocketat talks about the concern with rainfall there, and how much of their ritual activity was designed to interact with the beings that are behind rainfall, these thunder and lightning, I hate to say gods, but supernatural beings, right? So there was in their minds a direct correlation to altering reality for what they needed, and the ritual activities that they were up to.
Yeah, this has been fascinating. Like I said, I'd love you to have you back for a part 2. And do you want to tell everybody where they can get the book? And thanks for doing this, PD or Danny. This was awesome.
My pleasure. Yeah, you can get all of my books. There are currently 4 out. My first book, Alchemically Stoned. My second book is called Angels in Vermilion, and is kind of a deep dive into alchemy versus Freemasonry, what the first book was about. My third book is on theurgy, which is a ritual application of Platonic metaphysics. And then my most recent book, Tripping the Trail of Ghosts, is about the Native American afterlife model and the sorts of rituals and drugs they would use to access it. All of them are available anywhere books are sold. Barnes and Noble, you can get them Amazon. You can get them at Walmart or Kmart. They're all over the place. So yeah, check them out. And if you have any questions, I'm easy to track down on all of the social media platforms. You can find me under PD Newman. Reach out to me. Let's have a chat.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'd love to have a part 2. And guys, I'm going to be up next with the guy goes by his name UFO teacher. His name's Richard Smith, and that's going to be literally in 2 minutes. I'm going to go to the bathroom, take a leak, and get a drink of water, and then I'm coming back and I'll be live again. It'll be a different link, so just check my check my channels. I'll be live on YouTube and Rumble. And you can access everything on Rumble. It's rumble.com/typical skeptic podcast. I would say everybody go subscribe there, because You never know what's going to happen with YouTube. And thank you so much, Danny. And yeah, this was awesome, man. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thanks, guys. I'll see you in a couple minutes. Have a good night.